eligible for postseason awards in the NBA, which requires 65 games played or more. Neither of the two played 65 games this season. Cade Cunningham missed games because of a collapsed lung, which was actually caused on the court, right, initially. And Luka missed games for a myriad of reasons, but specifically the one that he fought was that he missed a couple of games for the birth of his daughter, which is completely understandable. Those, of course, are not the only games he missed. Would you like to hear? Why don't we do this? Let's hear Shams.
Yes.
And then I get to sit back, kick my feet up, and send us to break in 10 minutes. Here's Shams Charania, ESPN senior NBA insider on the 6 p.m. Eastern Sports Center, explaining why two guys who didn't play 65 games are eligible for awards despite not playing 65 games.
It sets a precedent, right? Because with Luka Doncic, 2 games he missed in December for the birth of his daughter in Slovenia. And for Cade Cunningham, a collapsed lung he missed a few weeks with. Both non-basketball related issues was what the PA cited, and that was their argument with the league, and the league accepted that. But the one interesting caveat here was Anthony Edwards. He applied as well, but the NBA denied Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards and the NBPA cited that he had a staph infection in his foot in December that he missed time with, and that allowed him to miss that 65-game mark. And Anthony Edwards' business manager, Justin Holland, told me today in a statement that I'm a bit confused at the clemency for Cade, who missed time for something that happened on the court, and not Ant, who missed time for an infection. But ultimately, you already know Ant. He isn't tripping at all over this.
That's the statement. Those aren't Shams' words. 65 games, the rule to be eligible for all NBA teams' awards. And that, of course, gives you a higher percentage potentially of the salary cap, thus more money the more games you play. CC, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, you can miss 17 games, right? So in any of those instances, those specific injuries that we've outlined, the collapsed lung from Cade, the runner's knee infection for Ant, and then Luka Doncic missing time for the birth of his daughter, none of those injury stints equate to 17 games. So I guess my problem with the league and the appeals process is the incongruency of it, because it seems arbitrary to allow Cade Cunningham and Luka Doncic to qualify for postseason awards and not Anthony Edwards. And I think head coach Chris Finch put it best, head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves. He said, and I quote, "I'm not sure why we have a rule if we have an appeals process that is overturned in 2/3 of the cases that were held before it. It feels more like a suggestion." That's what it feels like with the 65-game minimum rule. If we like you enough, then we'll let you slide. If you get close enough to the threshold, then we'll go ahead and push you over the top. We'll make you eligible for postseason accolades. But what players are really after is making you eligible for supermax contracts.
Correct.
That's what they're saying. And I think it's absolutely disgusting. If you don't want to enforce the 65-game rule, then don't have the rule. Because right now, there's so much ambiguity, there's so much gray in there, and it's going to be impossible for the NBA to have any type of consistency enforcing the rule without clear stipulations outlining the exceptions to the 65-game rule. This is completely in the eye of the beholder when it comes to interpreting whether or not the specific injury or the specific situation deserves a pass. And that's what I got a problem with. If you have a clear outline, if there is clear guidance going into the season as to the things that we will make exceptions for with the 65-game threshold, then cool. But that doesn't exist. So that's where I think it can get problematic for the league. Now, when it comes to the case of Luka Doncic specifically, as a Lakers fan, I'm glad that he's going to qualify for the opportunity, because I'd like to have our star player be an all-NBA guy. But at the same time, Ev, it is maddening to me for Luka to play the victim when we're talking about a player that got suspended for a game because he had 16 technical fouls this season. If he did play in that game, he would be eligible for postseason awards.
That's right.
So there's a part of this that was within his control where he didn't exercise some restraint, and it ended up costing him. Isn't that how things work in real world?
Yeah.
If you make a mistake, it could cost you a lot of money. Well, Luka made a mistake. With all of his complaining to the refs on the court, getting technical fouls, ultimately cost him a game, and that game was the game that he needed in order to qualify for the 65-game threshold. It is disgusting to me that the NBA has a rule and they won't enforce the rule.
Well said. I totally agree with you. I think it's utterly ridiculous, and I think it is a microcosm of the way in which the league operates right now. Both figuratively, play on words, and literally, but play on words. Adam Silver needs to be more stern.
Yeah.
Both in the definition
Literally
of the word and the name,
yeah.
Right? David Stern, the late great commissioner of the NBA. Like, this is ridiculous. This is not a hard thing to stand on. We have a rule. We have a threshold. You did not meet it. And there's an argument, to your point. It's a great point. There's an argument. If you reach 64, and you're not at 65, and one of those missed games is because of actions that garner suspension,
you're ineligible.
You're not eligible.
You're done.
You're not. I'm sorry. You're not eligible anymore. You get into a fight during the course of Isaiah Stewart got suspended at the Pistons. He's not eligible. I'm sorry. He's not going to be considered. But he got into a fight. I think with the Hornets, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and so if the Hornets win tonight, they play the Pistons.
I can't wait for that.
But if you get suspended for your actions, you're not eligible for this extraordinary circumstance exception.
Yeah.
That's what you want to find.
Yeah.
Before I agree with that. Cade has more of a leg to stand on to me than Luka.
Yeah, and based on what we heard from league sources, they considered Cade's situation a condition and not a basketball injury, even though the injury on the court led to the collapsed lung. I can understand that, though. Collapsed lung is extreme. Like, I get that. I understand that. That being said, if you don't have that spelled out ahead of time, Ev, it opens the door for all of the scrutiny, and it creates an environment where you're not going to have the consistent application of the rule. And so somebody like Anthony Edwards, who based on his play would qualify to be an all-NBA player, he's ultimately not going to have that opportunity, even though he's, a handful of games shy of the threshold. So it sucks that the NBA is taking this stance. This could, and I know this is going to sound like a bit of a hot take, these rulings could be the NBA trying to get ahead of what will be a stumbling block in the next collective bargaining agreement negotiations, which are set to happen 3 years from now, when there's an opt-out on both sides after the 28-29 season. Remember, the league just negotiated the media rights deals a year ago. It's, $77 billion? And so maybe the players want to get back to the table, and maybe this is a sticking point that the league is trying to get ahead of. Because if you listen to union leadership, Fred VanVleet, Sean Livingston, Andre Iguodala, all of those guys talked about it on a podcast recently, and they said that it's not necessarily about the rule, it's about who interprets the rule and who enforces the rule.
And who's applying for interpretation of the rule.
Exactly. So I think that this could be Adam Silver and the Board of Governors trying to get ahead of something that undoubtedly will be a sore spot when it comes to trying to continue to have labor peace, which is in the best interest of the entertainment product.
Let's pause for a second on this. I want to ask you a big picture question as an ex-athlete, one that Magic Johnson, no big deal, said this week is a person, Chris Canty, that other ex-athletes should emulate. Okay? That is true. Does it bother you as an ex-athlete that we need to beg athletes to play sports? That's the core of this. The core of the reason that the 65-game rule exists is because basketball players aren't playing enough basketball. That sounds utterly insane.
Yeah.
There is a trend. There's a through line for coaches you played for. You played for Al Groh. You played for Bill Parcells. You played for John Harbaugh. You played for Tom Coughlin. Now, you played for a couple others, but that's the through line.
Yeah.
Those guys want you to play sports, and you played the sport.
Exactly. You play a kid's game for a king's ransom. And I'm not saying that it doesn't come along with risk, because you are putting your body on the line.
Of course.
But when you have an opportunity to make the living that these guys make, it comes with some level of responsibility, and you have to be accountable to the people that are paying you. And that means being out there on the court. You have to be accountable to the fans, because they are the source of the revenue that's being generated by the league. And the fact that the players are so laissez-faire when it comes to their attitudes around meeting a 65-game threshold, a 65-game minimum to qualify for postseason awards. To me, it's ridiculous, Ev. I don't understand it. I get that players are going to fight tooth and nail to make as much money as they can because you have a finite period of time to monetize your athletic ability. I understand all of those things. I was an athlete. I get it. But you have an obligation to the people that are paying you, and you have an obligation to the generation coming after you to leave it better than you found it. And unfortunately, the generation of NBA players prior to this one, prior to the Cade Cunninghams, the Luka Doncic's, the Anthony Edwards, took advantage of a system that relied on the players to do the right thing. And now the NBA and its board of governors has taken the stance that we can't trust the players because we saw what had happened to the game and the state of affairs and the bind that it put us in with our television partners, our media partners, in terms of negotiating contracts, and we have no interest in doing that again. The players no longer get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to doing right by the fans and the owners and being trusted on their own volition to play in all of the games that they're capable of playing in. You can't trust the players to do that anymore. And to suggest otherwise, which is relaxing this 65-game minimum threshold, is a dangerous place to be in.
One last add-on. There is no chance in heck that if they didn't do this, we would be talking about this today. What they've actually done by being, to use your words, laissez-faire, is they've triggered us to once again talk about load management, players playing. This would not have been a topic today. If this ruling didn't come out, we wouldn't have brought this up. It would have just next topic. The fact that they brought it up, you shoot yourself in the foot because now everyone's going to be mentioning this today and talking about why this needs to happen in the first. Why do you want to remind people that basketball players didn't want to play basketball?
They're opening up Pandora's box.